In shame and secrecy. Imagine being a young, unwed mother, sent there to hide your transgression.
The way Johnson describes the routine, the rituals, the psychological manipulation, it's chilling. You can practically feel the hopelessness that permeates the place, the systematic stripping away of these young mothers' agency, their very identities, as they're forced to conform.
Welcome to Witter. Who has time to read? The podcast that brings deep dives for busy minds. Listen to AI hosts Jane and Dane and get ready to unpack the world's most captivating books in just a fraction of the time. Whether commuting, working out, or just squeezing in a quick break, we deliver key insights, thought-provoking themes, and takeaways you can carry into your day. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Plus, use our links in the description to purchase this book. Your support helps us bring more engaging book discussions to you. Listen and follow us wherever you get your podcasts. Who has time to read? You do, with Witter.
Welcome back to Witter, your deep dives for busy minds. We're kicking off Black History Month with our Black Voices series. And let me tell you, we're diving into a powerful one today, The House of Eve by Sadeqa Johnson. You ready to unpack this?
Absolutely. Johnson takes us right into the heart of the 1940s with two young Black women, Ruby in Philadelphia and Eleanor down in D.C. at Howard University. Both are striving for something more, but their paths are shaped by incredibly different forces.
It's like Johnson is holding up a mirror to the Black experience in that era, showing us the complexities, the struggles, and the triumphs. You immediately connect with Ruby's ambition. She's laser focused on a scholarship at Cheney University so she can become an optometrist. Think about it. For a young Black woman in the 40s, that kind of dream was revolutionary.
And it's not just about the financial hurdle, right? We learn that Ruby's living with her Aunt Marie because her own mother, Inez, isn't exactly a source of support. In fact, she's quite the opposite.
Yeah. Johnson doesn't sugarcoat anything. You get this sense that Inez is almost resentful of Ruby, quick to anger, even physically abusive. It's a stark contrast to the nurturing environment Marie provides.
It makes you wonder about the burdens Inez is carrying, what's led her to this point. But it also sets up this exploration of motherhood that runs throughout the book.
Totally. Because then we have Eleanor, who's dealing with the pressure to have children. But she's experiencing multiple miscarriages. Johnson really takes you into her emotional journey, the societal expectations she faces, and ultimately, her decision to pursue adoption.
And it's fascinating how Johnson weaves in the historical context here. Remember, we're talking about the 1940s, ideas about fertility, lineage, what it meant to be a mother in the Black community were all very different back then.
It's like these unspoken rules are hanging over both Ruby and Eleanor's heads, shaping their choices and their sense of self-worth. And it's not just motherhood, right? Race and class are so deeply intertwined with their stories.
Right. Johnson brilliantly illustrates how race and class intersect to define so much of their lived experience. Think about Ruby. Growing up in poverty in Philadelphia, she encounters racism daily, from street harassment to limited opportunities.
It's so visceral the way Johnson describes that scene, where Ruby goes shopping with her aunt for stockings. You can practically feel the sting of the racist glares, the casual cruelty that just permeated everyday life back then.
And that scene highlights a key insight, doesn't it, for Black women? Even something as simple as buying stockings becomes a reminder of their place in society. And then you have Eleanor, attending Howard University, this prestigious institution. But even there, she can't escape colorism and classism.
It's almost like Johnson is saying, look, even within the Black community, these prejudices exist. You see it in the way Eleanor is treated by William's family. They're wealthy, obsessed with their lineage, and they don't think she's quite good enough for their son.
It's a reminder that the Black experience isn't monolithic. There's this whole spectrum of social dynamics, and Johnson captures that so well. And in the midst of all this, both Ruby and Eleanor see education as their way out.
It's like education becomes this symbol of hope, of agency. For Ruby, that scholarship is everything. She's willing to sacrifice almost anything to get it, even her relationship with Shimmy.
Shimmy, you know, the sweet Jewish boy she falls for. Their romance adds another layer of complexity to the story, right? We're talking about interracial relationships in the 1940s, the societal taboos, the dangers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the scene where Shimmy confesses to his mother about Ruby's pregnancy, her reaction is just gut-wrenching. You can feel the weight of prejudice bearing down on them.
And then you have Eleanor, struggling to conceal her miscarriages from William's family. She's so afraid of disappointing them, of not living up to their expectations.
It's heartbreaking to see how these societal pressures weigh on both women. forcing them to make impossible choices. And speaking of impossible choices, we can't forget about the Magdalene home, this institution where unwed mothers were sent to give birth and surrender their babies.
Johnson's description of the shaming room, the psychological manipulation they endured, it's chilling. You really get a sense of the desperation these young women felt.
It makes you wonder what would have happened to Ruby if she hadn't found a way out. It's a reminder of a system that was designed to control women, especially black women, who dared to step outside societal norms. But before we get too deep into that, let's take a step back and consider something for a moment.
What's striking is that The House of Eve, it isn't just a story about external forces. It's about these women's internal struggles, their desires and doubts, and the choices they make. When the options seem so limited...
You're absolutely right. Take Ruby. She's so determined to get that scholarship. But when she falls for Shimmy, her whole plan is thrown off course. It's that classic battle between your head and your heart. And you can feel her torn between her love for him and the fear of losing her future.
And Johnson handles their interracial relationship with such nuance. It goes beyond just romantic love and delves into the social and cultural barriers of the time, the real dangers they faced. Remember that chilling moment when Shimmy's mother finds out about Ruby's pregnancy? Her reaction speaks volumes about the deep-seated prejudice they're up against.
That scene was so powerful, so heartbreaking. It just underscores the immense weight of societal expectations, how they could crush their hopes and dreams. And then, on the flip side, you have Eleanor, who's facing a completely different kind of pressure. The expectation to produce an heir for the Pride family.
Exactly. For Eleanor, her miscarriages aren't just personal tragedies. They're seen as failures that threaten her position within the family. And her decision to keep them secret, to maintain this facade of a perfect pregnancy, speaks volumes about the pressure to conform, to fit the mold that Rose, William's mother, has created for the Pride family.
It's as if both Ruby and Eleanor are forced to sacrifice their own desires, their own happiness, to appease these societal expectations. It makes you question how much agency they really have, how much their lives are shaped by forces beyond their control. And it makes you wonder, even today, have we really moved past this? Are women, particularly black women, still battling these same expectations and constraints?
It's a question that resonates, that lingers long after you finish the book. But The House of Eve goes even deeper. It confronts us with the Magdalene home, a place shrouded in shame and secrecy. Imagine being a young, unwed mother, sent there to hide your transgression.
The way Johnson describes the routine, the rituals, the psychological manipulation, it's chilling. You can practically feel the hopelessness that permeates the place, the systematic stripping away of these young mothers' agency, their very identities, as they're forced to conform.
It's not just the physical confinement, it's the emotional toll that's truly devastating. Think about the shaming room, the constant reminders of their supposed sinfulness, the pressure to relinquish their babies. It's all designed to break them down, to make them compliant.
It's impossible not to think about the lasting trauma, the scars that remain long after leaving that place. It's a stark reminder of a system designed to control and punish women, particularly those who dared to defy societal norms.
And remember, this practice of forced surrender, it wasn't just a relic of the past, it persisted well into the 20th century, leaving a devastating legacy for countless women. The House of Eve forces us to confront this dark chapter, a chapter that's often been silenced or glossed over.
And in doing so, it reminds us that these stories, these voices, need to be heard, because only by acknowledging our past can we hope to build a more just and equitable future. And that's one of the things that makes this book so relevant for Black History Month, right? It compels us to think about the ongoing struggle for equality and justice.
Absolutely. The House of Eve isn't just a historical novel. It's a reflection of contemporary issues, a call to action. It urges us to support Black authors, to seek out diverse perspectives, to amplify these stories that need to be told, because these stories, as we're seeing with The House of Eve, have the power to challenge assumptions, to broaden our understanding, and ultimately, to move us towards a more empathetic and inclusive society.
Speaking of the power of storytelling, what stood out to you about the literary techniques Johnson uses to bring these stories to life? For me, the dual narrative structure is so effective. We experience the world through both Ruby and Eleanor's eyes, seeing how their journeys intertwine and diverge, and the way Johnson seamlessly switches back and forth between their perspectives keeps you completely engrossed.
I was captivated by her use of sensory details. Especially in Ruby's chapters, you can almost feel the sweltering heat of the Philadelphia summer, the suffocating atmosphere of her aunt's apartment, the grittiness of the neighborhood, and the way Johnson weaves in the music, the food, the everyday rhythms of Black life during that era. You're transported right back to the 1940s.
It's so vivid. And then, with Eleanor, you're immersed in a completely different world. The intellectual energy of Howard University, the hushed quiet of the library, the elegance of the Pride family's world. But Johnson captures the atmosphere equally well, with all its underlying social tensions, the weight of tradition and legacy. And what I love is how she develops her characters, both major and minor, so they feel real, relatable, even when they make choices you might question.
Absolutely. Take Inez, for example. While she's not necessarily a sympathetic character, Johnson gives us glimpses into her pain, her struggles, allowing us to understand, even if we can't condone, her actions.
And then there's Shimmy, this sweet Jewish boy who falls head over heels for Ruby. Their relationship is so tender, so fraught with danger. You find yourself rooting for them, even though you know it might not end well. The way Johnson handles the resolution of their story is heartbreaking, but undeniably realistic. It reminds us that love doesn't always conquer all, especially when facing the crushing weight of societal prejudice.
And then there's the ending of the book. Without giving too much away, I found it both satisfying and thought-provoking. It leaves you with a sense of hope, yet you're left pondering the choices these women made, the sacrifices they endured, and the legacies they leave behind. It's not a neat and tidy ending, but it feels authentic, true to the complexities of their journeys.
I agree. It leaves you with this profound admiration. Sure, their resilience, their determination to carve out their own lives, despite the incredible obstacles they face. And that's what makes The House of Eve so powerful. It's not just a story about two women in the 1940s. It's a timeless tale about resilience, ambition, and the enduring strength of the human spirit. But it also raises some critical questions about the representation of Black voices in literature, right?
Yeah.
What does a book like The House of Eve contribute to the broader literary landscape?
It's about expanding our understanding of history, seeing the world through a different lens. The House of Eve doesn't shy away from difficult topics, like the brutal realities of racism, poverty, and the societal pressures Black women faced in that era. And by centering these voices, these experiences, Johnson challenges the dominant narratives. Those often sanitized versions of history we're taught in school. She compels us to confront uncomfortable truths, to grapple with the complexities of the past, and to acknowledge the ongoing impact of historical injustices.
It's not about rewriting history. It's about enriching the narrative, filling in the gaps, and ensuring that the voices of those who have been marginalized and silenced are finally heard.
And it's also about recognizing the richness and diversity within the Black community itself. The House of Eve showcases a range of experiences, from Ruby's working class struggles to Eleanor's navigation of the elite Black social circles, highlighting the nuances within the Black experience.
It's a powerful reminder that there's no single monolithic Black experience. There's a spectrum of stories, perspectives, and identities that enrich our understanding of humanity as a whole. It makes you realize how important it is to seek out these diverse narratives, right? These stories that challenge our assumptions and broaden our understanding of what it means to be human. And The House of Eve does that brilliantly. One thing that really struck me was how both Ruby and Eleanor grapple with this idea of passing. Ruby literally tries to pass as white to escape the Magdalene home. And while Eleanor doesn't explicitly try to pass, her lighter skin tone and William's family's emphasis on their near whiteness add another layer to this conversation.
It's a fascinating parallel, and it speaks to the complexities of colorism within the Black community itself. For Ruby, passing is about survival, a desperate attempt to escape a system designed to punish her for her race and her perceived transgressions. But for Eleanor, it's more about fitting in, navigating a world where lighter skin grants certain privileges and access.
And what's so powerful is that both women ultimately reject the idea of passing. They choose to embrace their Blackness, even though it comes at a cost. It's a reminder that true liberation lies in embracing who you are, not in trying to conform to someone else's expectations.
Exactly. And that act of defiance, that choice to define themselves on their own terms, is incredibly empowering. It's a central theme that runs throughout the book. Resilience, agency, women fighting for the right to define their own lives, their own motherhood, their own identities.
And it's a story that continues to resonate today as we grapple with issues of race, class, gender, and reproductive rights. The struggles these women face may seem like a distant past, but the echoes of those struggles are still felt in our society today.
Absolutely. And that's why it's so crucial to keep these conversations alive, to keep reading and discussing books like The House of Eve that challenge us to confront uncomfortable truths and to work towards a more just and equitable world. And for our listeners, that's what we hope you take away from this deep dive. The House of Eve is just one example of the powerful stories waiting to be discovered, stories that offer unique insights into the Black experience.
We want to leave you with this thought. What stories are you seeking out? What voices are you amplifying? Whose history are you learning and sharing? Because through these acts of engagement, these conversations, we can truly honor Black History Month and continue the work towards a more inclusive and understanding society.
And remember, even though our deep dive is ending here, the journey of discovery never does. Keep those minds curious, those hearts open, and keep listening to those Witter deep dives.
Thanks for listening to Witter, Who Has Time to Read, produced by One Media. Please support the author by purchasing the book or audiobook using the link in the description. It's a great way to help keep the art of writing alive. And stay in the loop. Subscribe to our newsletter for updates on weekly deep dives. And don't forget to share your thoughts or suggest our next deep dive at witterpodcast@gmail.com.